The Regional Director for AFSCME Council 8. Statewide, our organization represents about over 40,000 public sector and private sector employees in the Cincinnati region. We represent over 7,000.
Please talk into the...
I'm sorry. We represent over 7,000 public and private sector unions. From cities as large as Cincinnati, where we have 2,200 members, and we have a Butler County unit of 2 custodians. So we have a wide range of city, county, also the University of Cincinnati, the University Hospital, and also the Cincinnati Zoo. So we represent a wide range of employees. I've been in this job for 6 years. Prior to that, I was an attorney for 8 years, was in house counsel for Ohio Council 8. And like my co-part, we both share a master's degree in public administration. So, but based on my 14 years of experience at AFSCME, and we've seen a lot of changes over the decades of our economy. Right now we have a lot of difficulties of our economy, which is transforming into difficulties of tax revenue, which is transforming into difficulties in the federal, state, and local government. And we deal mostly with the state and local government aspects of that. So these are the realities that we're faced with. And we have a growing ever need of a public who needs more and more services with less and less revenue. So the employees are constantly being asked, and the leadership is constantly being asked to do more with less. So in this atmosphere, we see concepts come up like privatization or deregulation, or different ways to save money, to do it faster, to do it cheaper. And the assumption is that, that it will reduce costs and improve services. But that's a great assumption, but in reality, you really have to look at the picture. And like he said, you have to really look at the service, and you have to really look at how this can be done better. I'm always towards innovation and collaboration. In this county, we have over 60 governmental units, each with their own, a lot of times their own police, their own fire, and a lot of their own services. And I always try to say, can we do more collaboration between government entities before we go privatization? We go back to the 80s when we said deregulation. We went that route, and look at the debacles we had. We had the housing market crisis because we wanted to deregulate some banks and make it easier for people to get into houses and to get loans. We had Enron crisis in the electricity area, utilities, where we thought, okay, let's privatize and deregulate and get Enron in that big fiasco. WorldCom communications. So it's not always that the private sector is better than the public sector. But right now we're looking at a lot of different areas of infrastructure sell-offs, public services, whether in education, public safety, public roads. I mean, these are the kind of options that our elected officials and administration and our members have to consider when we look at the idea of privatization. And some of the concerns that we have come across, both locally and statewide, first, when you talk about privatization, is the loss of control, the accountability. Because when you have something go wrong now, that light goes out on your road, what do? You're calling your elected officials. I want that fixed. I want that fire hydrant fixed. When it comes to a private contractor, they're not publicly accountable. You can talk to that worker, and he doesn't work for you, he works for that contractor. So you have to almost go through your elected officials to go through the administration to get to the contractor. So the lack of transparency is another issue. Private contractors aren't subject to public records law or open meetings laws. I mean, they can run their business like they run their business. So sometimes when you're trying to get information to see how well they're providing the service, they're not always as open, especially not to the public. So that's a difficulty too we've seen. Now, another thing when you talk about private sector, their mentality is profit first, services second. I mean, they have to make a profit, which a lot of what he had said about the marketplace. Is there a marketplace for the service? Because a lot of times what you see is they low bid to get the contract. But once they get the contract and the city or the township or the county has sold off its equipment, well now my costs have just gone up. Why? Because now I know you can't take it back. So I'm going to increase my costs slowly but surely. I mean, there are a lot of wide-ranging factors that have to be considered. Another thing is the loss of revenue. For example, last year or two, the city talked about selling off its water resource, which I sat on the committee that the mayor appointed me to, and I kept saying this is only going to get more valuable. but you're selling it off, and that's going to be lost in revenue for the city. So short term, you might get a few bucks. Long term, you're going to lose out. The Indiana deal, they did, sell off their total for, they got a couple $100 million, but it's been estimated over 75 years, that's going to bring that foreign company over $11.3 billion. And that's money that's not going to go back into the infrastructure, it's going to go to that company. And unfortunately, in this case, it's going to go to a company not even in the United States. So these are the things that really have to be looked at. When we did the water district consideration, the mayor appointed a committee, and there was a lot of involvement. There was a lot of discussion, and that's what was needed. And ultimately, they did not go forward with the water district, which I think was the best interest, not only from my perspective as a union official, because I probably would have still wanted to represent them even if they worked for another private sector company. But what I was looking at more was as a citizen, as a worker in this city, what's in the best interest of the public. And in the water district situation, nobody can tell me how this was going to help the public. It was going to help a lot of management because now they're not going to be under the scrutiny of city council, and now their raises can go up, and there's no transparency there when they become a water district. But how is that going to help the public? Especially with something like water. And another thing that the city does, collaborating with the county since 1968, is the MSD, Metropolitan Sewer District. Again, city and county working together to solve a critical problem. And, the county owns MSD, but the city is under a 40-year contract to manage with its employees. And this is a great example of county and city interaction that we need more of. We need more of it not only at the local level between small cities and townships, but also at the county level with different agencies. And that's also being considered by the state of whether they can combine some county agencies. But there's got to be a thorough review. There has to be public input. It can't be a quick decision. Because ultimately, we can't look for any short-term solutions to our economic problems. We've got to look more long-term. Short-term, sure, there might be some fast money, but long-term, how does it impact the service to the public? I'm sorry, just getting over a cold. But another thing we've also seen is the idea that, well, if you make it private sector, there'll be more competition. But actually, we see less competition. For example, with the fire hydrants. If a private contractor took on the fire hydrants, they're going to have the equipment, the county will probably sell off their equipment, probably buy the equipment. There's going to be less people who are involved. There are not a lot of companies that can do that kind of project. Prison systems, not many companies can run prison systems. So if you said, okay, well, I don't like this prison company, I'm going to go to another one, there's not a lot of competition in that area. Water distribution, there's not a lot of pipes out there. So once you sell off your pipes, that company is going to be in control of that asset. So the idea that there would be more competition if you privatize services is not necessarily true. And again, there's another consideration that has to be taken into consideration, especially the impact on the public. But there are a lot of solutions that we try to work with employers on before we get to the privatization kind of solution. How can we streamline? How can we make it more cost effective? How can we do things better? One of the things that we're working with the city of Cincinnati, for example, is regarding what they call empowerment employees, self-directed teams. The idea that you don't need 10 managers over one person. One city employee told me last year during a budget discussion, I have 4 managers, and I have to report to 4 managers. How efficient is that? So the idea is, how can you streamline it so we can give more power to the frontline workers to solve the issues that they deal with and deliver the services, and less management. Now, we've seen a lot of streamlining of management in the private sector. You have not seen that in some sections of the public sector. And it's another consideration we have to look at. Because ultimately, you're going to need someone on that ground to deliver that service. You don't necessarily need that person going to report to 4 different managers. But overall, privatization is one solution. my perspective, there's a lot of solutions that have to be really examined before you take that jump. Because once you take that jump, especially with big services, JFS, Child and Family Services, and services they provide, Children's Services Boards, there's all kind of different entities in the county and services that they provide. But before you take that leap, you really got to look at the huge impact of long-term interest, especially about the public.